Marcus wiped the tears from his 8-year-old daughter's cheeks as she clung to his worn uniform shirt in the hospital waiting room. "Daddy, will Grandma be okay?" Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the sterile hum of fluorescent lights. He didn't have an answer. Couldn't afford the surgery, couldn't even afford to miss another day of work. All he had were calloused hands, a janitor's cart, and a heart that refused to give up on the people he loved. 3 floors above them, in the gleaming executive suite of Meridian Technologies, CEO Jonathan Hayes was about to discover that sometimes the most profound solutions come from the most unexpected places. Marcus Rivera had been cleaning the offices of Meridian Technologies for 6 years, arriving each night at 10 p.m. after tucking Emma into bed at his mother's house. The tech giant's headquarters buzzed with innovation during the day, but in the quiet hours of darkness, Marcus moved through the corridors like a ghost, emptying trash cans, mopping floors, and occasionally pausing to look at the complex equations and diagrams left on whiteboards by engineers who earned in a month what he made in a year. His mother, Rosa, had raised him to believe that every job was honorable, every person deserving of respect. "My Joe," she would say in her gentle Spanish accent, "it doesn't matter if you clean floors or run companies, or what matters is how you treat people." Now Rosa lay in a hospital bed, her weak heart needing surgery they couldn't afford, while Marcus scrubbed the toilets of millionaires. The crisis began on a Tuesday night in March. Marcus was cleaning the 23rd floor when he noticed something unusual. Lights were still on in the main conference room, and voices carried through the glass walls. CEO Jonathan Hayes sat at the head of a massive table, surrounded by his top executives, all of them looking exhausted and defeated. Marcus had seen Hayes before. Of course, the 42-year-old CEO was known for arriving early and staying late, for treating his security guards and receptionists with the same courtesy he showed his board members. Hayes had even nodded to Marcus a few times in the elevator, offering a tired but genuine smile that suggested he actually saw the night janitor as a human being. Tonight, however, Hayes looked like a man watching his empire crumble. "The server farm in Dallas went down 6 hours ago," one executive was saying. "We're losing approximately $16 million every hour this continues. The backup systems aren't responding," another added. "We've had our best engineers working on it remotely, but nothing's working. If we can't get those servers back online by morning, we're looking at potential bankruptcy." The Reynolds contract alone. Hayes rubbed his temples. How long would it take to physically get someone to Dallas? With the storm grounding flights? 12 hours minimum, sir. Even then, there's no guarantee our people can fix what's wrong. Marcus continued his cleaning, trying not to eavesdrop, but the desperation in their voices was palpable. Meridian Technologies employed over 8,000 people. If the company failed, it wouldn't just be Hayes who suffered, it would be the security guards who always asked about Emma's school projects, the receptionists who saved day-old pastries for him, the thousands of families who depended on those paychecks. As he emptied the waste baskets, Marcus's mind wandered to his own problems. The hospital had given them until Friday to come up with the down payment for his mother's surgery, or they'd have to discharge her and hope for the best with medication. Help wasn't enough, not for the woman who had worked 2 jobs to keep him in school, who had babysat him every night for 6 years without complaint. It was then that Marcus overheard something that made him stop mid-motion. "The Dallas facility has that old manual override system," a younger executive was saying. "If someone could physically access the main server room and flip the emergency switches in sequence, it might restart the whole network." "That's a 20-year-old system," Hayes replied. "Nobody remembers the proper sequence anymore." "Actually," the younger man continued, pulling out a tablet, "I found the documentation in our archived files. The sequence is here, but you need someone physically present to execute it. Someone who can follow technical instructions precisely. Marcus felt his heart skip. Dallas. He had a cousin in Dallas, Miguel, who worked at a 24-hour diner near the airport. More importantly, Marcus had grown up taking apart electronics with his father, learning to follow technical manuals for everything from car engines to television sets. His hands might be rough from years of manual labor, but they were steady and precise. For 10 minutes, Marcus wrestled with himself. What was he thinking? He was a janitor, not a technician. He couldn't just waltz into a corporate crisis and offer to save the day. They'd laugh him out of the building, or worse, fire him for presumption. But then he thought about Emma's face in that hospital waiting room, about his mother's weak smile when she told him not to worry about the money, about the 8,000 families who would wake up unemployed if Meridian Technologies collapsed. Taking a deep breath that felt like stepping off a cliff, Marcus knocked softly on the conference room door. The conversation inside stopped abruptly. Hayes looked up, surprise flickering across his exhausted features. "Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt, sir," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I couldn't help overhearing about Dallas. I might be able to help." The room fell silent. Several executives exchanged glances that ranged from amused to annoyed. Hayes, however, studied Marcus with genuine curiosity. "I have a cousin in Dallas," Marcus continued quickly before he lost his nerve. "He could pick me up from the airport and drive me to your facility. I'm good with technical instructions, sir. I know this sounds crazy, but if you can get me there, I can follow your manual and flip those switches." "You're a janitor," one of the executives said, not unkindly but with obvious skepticism. "Yes, sir, I am. But I'm also a father who needs this job, and I know there are thousands of other people who need theirs too. I've been fixing things my whole life. If you walk me through it, I can do it." Hayes was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus with an intensity that made the janitor's hands sweat. Finally, the CEO spoke. "What's your name?" "Marcus Rivera, sir." "Marcus, do you understand what we're asking? This isn't changing a light bulb. One wrong move could make everything worse." "I understand, sir. But right now, you're looking at losing everything anyway, aren't you?" Hayes smiled, at the first genuine smile Marcus had seen from him in months of brief elevator encounters. "You're right about that." He turned to his team. "Get me a charter flight to Dallas." Now, what happened next became legend at Meridian Technologies. Hayes personally drove Marcus to the airport, spending the flight explaining the technical details of what needed to be done. They landed in Dallas at 3 a.m. met by Miguel in his battered Honda Civic. The server facility was a fortress of blinking lights and humming machinery. Marcus, guided by Hayes over video call and armed with the 20-year-old manual, worked methodically through the emergency restart sequence. His hands moved with the same careful precision he brought to everything else, whether mopping floors or helping Emma with homework. At 4:17 a.m. Central Time, the screens flickered back to life. The servers hummed back online. In New York, exhausted executives cheered as their monitoring systems showed green lights across the board. But Hayes wasn't done. The next morning, he called an all-hands meeting, as something that had never happened in the company's history. 8,000 employees gathered in the main auditorium and satellite locations, expecting perhaps a lecture about the previous night's crisis. Instead, Hayes brought Marcus onto the stage. "I want you all to meet Marcus Rivera," Hayes said, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "Some of you might recognize him. He's been keeping our offices clean for 6 years. Last night, Marcus saved this company." The murmur that went through the crowd was audible even over the microphones. Marcus could have walked past our conference room and minded his own business, Hayes continued. Instead, He risked embarrassment and job security to offer help. He flew to Dallas on his own time, with no guarantee of anything except the chance to help his coworkers keep their jobs. Hayes turned to Marcus, who stood frozen with stage fright and overwhelming emotion. "Marcus, I know why you took that risk. HR pulled your employee file this morning. I know about your mother's surgery, about the medical bills, about Emma. You didn't help us despite your problems. You helped us because you understand what it means when people need their jobs." The CEO's voice grew stronger. "Effective immediately, Meridian Technologies is establishing the Rivera Family Emergency Medical Fund. We're covering your mother's surgery completely, and we're setting up a fund to help any employee facing similar medical crises." The applause began slowly, then built to a roar. But Hayes held up his hand. He wasn't finished. "More importantly, Marcus, I'm offering you a position in our facilities management department. Full benefits, college tuition assistance for Emma, and a salary that reflects the value you bring to this companion not just last night, but every night for 6 years. Marcus felt his knees go weak. Through tears he hadn't realized were falling, he managed to whisper, "Thank you, sir." But Hayes stepped forward and did something that brought the entire auditorium to their feet. He extended his hand to Marcus and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Thank you, Marcus. You reminded us what this company is really about, taking care of each other." 6 months later, Marcus walked across a stage to receive his facilities management certification, with Emma cheering from the front row and Rosa fully recovered from her surgery wiping proud tears from her eyes. Hayes was there too, applauding as loudly as anyone. The story spread far beyond Meridian Technologies. Business schools began teaching it as a case study in leadership and human capital. Hayes was invited to speak at conferences around the world, but he always brought Marcus with him, insisting that the real lesson wasn't about emergency technical fixes. It was about creating workplaces where people felt safe being human. Emma, now 9 and thriving in private school thanks to her father's new position, still asks him about that night sometimes. "Daddy, weren't you scared to talk to all those important people?" Marcus always gives her the same answer, "Mija, when you care about people, you find the courage to do scary things. Your grandmother taught me that." The impact tripled outward in ways Marcus never imagined. Other companies began implementing similar employee assistance programs. Hayes and Marcus started a non-profit foundation focused on educational opportunities for children of service workers. The story was shared millions of times on social media, inspiring people around the world to look for ways to help others, regardless of their position or title. But perhaps the most profound change was the simplest one. At Meridian Technologies, there are no longer any just janitors or just security guards or just receptionists. There are team members, each valued for their unique contribution to the whole. Marcus still cleans an hour as part of his facilities management duties, but he also mentors new employees and serves on the company's employee welfare committee. He never forgot that night in March when courage and compassion collided in a conference room, proving that sometimes the biggest solutions come from the humblest hearts. And every morning, when he drops Emma off at school, she asks the same question. "What are you going to fix today, Daddy?" His answer is always the same. "Whatever needs fixing, Mija." Whatever needs fixing.